Don't ask you. We'd be very interested in using you. And of course, it was the best advice I could possibly have had. Back in 1942, about the same time that Rodgers and Hammerstein were embarking on Oklahoma, a 24-year-old New York City lyricist, Alan J. Lerner, teamed up with a 38-year-old Viennese composer named Frederick Loewe.
We called Frederick Loewe Fritzy, and I met him in my very first show on Broadway. He played the piano in the pit, and he would say, same thing every night. He would say, someday, he was Austrian. They had an accent. He would say, someday I am going to write the best musical on Broadway. Many, many years later, I'm standing backstage at the opening of My Fair Lady, and Fritzy came over to me and he whispered in my ear and he said, well, he said, I wrote the best musical on Broadway, and indeed he had.
Lerner and Loewe spent years trying to turn a classic play, George Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion, into a musical. Oscar Hammerstein told Lerner it can't be done, admitting that he and Dick Rodgers had worked on it for over a year before giving up. Pygmalion had no love story, a major problem for a Broadway show. The turning point for Lerner and Loewe came when they decided to follow the 1938 movie version.
You see this creature with her curbstone English? Well, sir, in 3 months I could pass her off as a duchess at an ambassador's reception. No.
Their lyrics and music would bring romance into the story of a poor flower girl named Eliza Doolittle.
All I want is a room somewhere far away from the cold night air, with one enormous chair. Wouldn't it be lovely? Lots of chocolate for me to eat, lots of coal making lots of it, warm face, warm hands, warm feet. Wouldn't it be lovely? Oh,
Selected to play Eliza's teacher, Henry Higgins, was Rex Harrison, a temperamental actor who had never sung on stage.
I knew I was never going to be able to sing properly, so I got this man in, and I said, what the hell am I going to do with this? With these numbers? And he said, well, what about talking on pitch?
From an average man am I.
An average man am I, of no eccentric whim, who likes to live his life free of strife, doing whatever he thinks is best for him. Well, just an ordinary man. But let a woman in your life. Stop! Take it out. I demand that be taken out.
Take out what?
That ya-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. It's so loud. How do I know where to sing?
You'll get used to it, right?
I will never get used to it.
You know, you rehearse with the piano, and then you hear the orchestra, and instead of hearing da-da-da-dee-da-dum, da-da-da-dee-da-dum, you hear diddle-diddle-diddle-diddle-bum-bum-bum, diddle-diddle-diddle-bum-bum-bum, and you don't know where you are. This happens to many people, including a good singer. Well, Rex panicked.
We have to come to some understanding about this, you know, otherwise the curtain will not go up tomorrow night.
Rex Harrison's stage jitters and the inexperience of the leading lady were swept aside by director Moss Hart, and when My Fair Lady opened in March 1956, it was immediately hailed as a landmark of the American musical.
I could have danced all night, I could have danced all night, and still have begged for more. I could have spread my wings and done 1,000 things I'd never done before. I'll never know.
Certainly one of the great opening nights was My Fair Lady, a classical breakthrough because it had intellectual content. I knew perfectly well I was seeing something greater of its kind that I'd ever seen before. Julie Andrews at 18 or whatever, coming back into the library, you know, exquisitely dressed and singing, I could have danced all night, I could have danced all night. Oh, that was tremendous.
I could have danced.
This quintessential Cinderella story was irresistible to America, and My Fair Lady played for a record-breaking 6 years on Broadway. The original cast album stayed on the bestseller charts for 482 weeks, setting a record that would outlast Elvis Presley and the Beatles.
The whole point about the musical is selling America, showing America its dream come true. Stories about where someone starts at a disadvantage and through a combination of goodness, forbearance, and luck, triumphs. It's the triumph of self. It's the dream. That's what America is, and Broadway is always telling that story.
In 1957, Mary Martin asked Rodgers and Hammerstein to write a single song for a play she was working on, a project that ultimately became The Sound of Music. During the writing, Oscar began to suffer stomach pains, and after rehearsals began, he was diagnosed with cancer.
Oscar was dying, and he had a lunch for his birthday, and he had on top of the piano 2 small piles of formal photographs. He asked me if I wanted one. And I thought, you know, it's like my father giving me, you know, but I said, sure, I'd love to have one. I said, would you sign it? And he looked at me. Lunch was announced. He didn't know what he wanted to sign. Suddenly he got a smile on his face and he signed it. And it said, for Stevie, my friend and teacher. And in King and I, he talks about how by your pupils you are taught. And that's what he meant. And of course, it was a major moment for me, and still is.
Hammerstein's lyrics for The Sound of Music offered new beginnings and the discovery of love in unexpected places. Its unwavering optimism was a fitting final statement of Oscar's philosophy of hope.
The hills are alive with the sound of music, with songs they have sung for 1,000 years.
To many critics, The Sound of Music seemed hopelessly outdated, an operetta without innovation or modern sensibilities. But audiences loved it, and the feature film was a blockbuster, reinvigorating the classic big-screen musical.
Wants to beat like the wings of the birds that rise from the lake to the trees. My heart wants to sigh like a chime that flies from a church on a breeze.
But during the show's tryout in 1959, the uplifting story was tempered by Hammerstein's failing health.
Not having Oscar there at the first place out of town must have been very hard for everybody. The wonderful period at the end of the sentence was they needed one new song, so Rodgers and Hammerstein wrote Edelweiss.
Edelweiss, Edelweiss,
which was the last song they wrote together, the last song for The Sound of Music, and it's such a wonderfully simple, wrapping everything up statement.
clean and bright.
It's such a very simple lullaby of a song about flowers bloom and die, but they bloom again. Here's a man, he has terminal cancer, and he's writing a song about things that always are blooming and always are growing.
Bloom and grow
Oscar Hammerstein died at home on August 23, 1960. That night, for the first time in theatrical history, both Broadway and London's West End honored the same man. The lights in London were dimmed for 3 minutes in tribute, but in Times Square, traffic came to a complete halt, and the lights on Broadway were turned off completely.
Bless my